It all started with a scream. Not the playful kind from kids on bikes or the panicked kind from a car wreck. No, this was raw fury, echoed across the cul-de-sac like a war horn. When I stepped onto my porch, coffee in one hand and a half-toasted bagel in the other, I saw Officer Lane wrestling Karen Wilkes to the ground in front of my grandfather's house. She was shrieking about weapons of mass deception and trying to claw her way toward the thing in question, a wooden walking stick, my grandfather's walking stick. The one he's used for 20 years, ever since he lost his sight. The thing the HOA security patrol had just confiscated, claiming it was a weapon violation. It started with a clipboard and a power trip. The new HOA Community Patrol program was Karen Wilkes' latest crusade. A squad of glorified hall monitors in beige windbreakers and knockoff aviators who rolled through the neighborhood like mall cops with delusions of grandeur. 2 weeks before everything blew up, the board approved the initiative with barely any oversight, citing rising disorder and property value decline, even though crime was non-existent and property values were at an all-time high. I remember Karen's exact phrasing at the meeting. "We need visible deterrence, strong examples, discipline." I knew then she wasn't talking about safety, she was talking about control. The very next day, they rolled out their little stormtrooper squad, calling themselves the Community Standards Enforcement Task Force. You can't make this stuff up. They were armed with measuring tape, laminated HOA bylaws, and an appetite for confrontation. Within the first 72 hours, they issued 19 violation notices, mostly for things like unapproved garden gnomes, garbage cans being visible from the street, or, I kid you not, grass that looked aggressively green. Apparently, Karen had decided that healthy lawns were now disruptive to neighborhood visual harmony. But the moment things turned from petty to personal was the day they came for my grandfather's walking stick. Grandpa's porch has always been his kingdom. Every morning he sits there with a cup of black coffee in one hand and that carved wooden cane in the other. It's not some store-bought thing, it's a polished walnut walking stick with a silver eagle head grip and a brass collar. A retirement gift from the state legislature when he stepped down as governor over a decade ago. The man's been blind for 20 years, and that stick isn't just a mobility tool, it's his sword, his badge, his identity. So when Karen's little patrol approached our porch that morning, clipboards in hand and badge stickers on their windbreakers, I didn't think much of it at first. I figured they'd pretend to measure our mailbox or claim our lawn statues exceeded the allowable whimsy factor. But no, they marched right up to my grandfather and demanded he hand over his walking stick. I was in the garage at the time, working on my bike chain, and I heard the exchange before I saw it. "Sir," one of them barked, "you're in possession of a concealed weapon not authorized under HOA regulations." There was a pause, then Grandpa's voice, calm but edged with disbelief. "You mean my cane?" By the time I got outside, they had their hands on it. I watched two of them, full-grown adults, yanking at the stick while my 84-year-old blind grandfather tried to hold on, his knuckles white with strain. Karen was standing at the bottom of the steps, arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd just swallowed a lemon. "It's ornamental. Could be used to hurt someone." I stepped between them and pulled the cane out of the patrolman's grip. "You touch him again, and I swear, I'll file a police report so fast you'll be peeling citation stickers off your bedroom mirror for the next decade." Karen didn't flinch. She just raised an eyebrow. "This is a community matter," she said. "You'd be wise not to interfere with enforcement protocol." Protocol. She said it like she was leading a SWAT team. The next day, we got hit with our first violation. Unauthorized weapon stored in plain sight on residential premises, $250 fine. It was taped to the front door in bright orange, like a parking ticket on a windshield. Grandpa didn't say anything. He just sat in his chair like always, cane across his lap, jaw clenched tighter than I'd seen in years. We didn't pay the fine. The day after that, 2 more notices arrived. One for failure to secure porch perimeter against weapon theft, and one for obstruction of community patrol duties. That one was addressed to me. I tried calling the HOA office. I left voicemails. I sent emails. No response. I even showed up in person and was told Karen was in a closed-door compliance briefing, whatever that meant. When I finally cornered her at the next neighborhood meeting, she waved me off like a mosquito. "Rules are rules," she said. "Perhaps your family should consider downsizing if compliance is such a burden." From that point on, the harassment ramped up. The patrol started circling our house multiple times a day. They'd take photos of our driveway, of the recycling bin not being perfectly flush with the curb, of Grandpa's chair cushion, which apparently was too faded to match the neighborhood's soft autumnal palette. One morning, I caught a patrol member peeking into our side gate with a body cam on his vest and a tape measure in his hand. When I asked what he was doing, he claimed he was assessing the shadow cast by unauthorized porch items. We had a fern, that was it. I started documenting everything, photos, videos. I bought a dash cam and pointed it out the front window. I printed out every violation, every email, every screenshot of our security feed. Grandpa was losing sleep. He stopped sitting out on the porch. Said he felt like a target in a shooting gallery. I offered to take the stick inside, maybe just keep it out of sight, but he shook his head. "The day I hide my cane is the day I let them tell me I don't belong here," he said. "This is my home, and if they don't like how I sit on my porch, then they can take it up with the men who carved my name into the cornerstone of the state capitol." I knew then that this wasn't going to be a quiet protest. This was war. And if Karen Wilkes wanted a battle over symbols and ordinances, she was about to find out just how much weight one stick could carry when it belonged to the wrong man to underestimate. Grandpa never bragged. He wasn't the kind of man who framed his own accolades or name-dropped his friends in power, and if you didn't know better, you'd think he was just another old vet with a good recliner and too many bird feeders. But beneath that weathered ball cap and those quiet porch mornings sat a man who'd once turned the entire state legislature inside out like a sock. I grew up hearing whispers, the kind old men say with reverence, about how Governor Walter Emerson had passed more veteran housing initiatives than the 4 governors before him combined. How he once filibustered a corruption bill for 26 hours straight with a blown knee and a broken voice. How he'd never lost an election, even when the odds were stacked and the donors leaned the other way. But Grandpa never brought it up, not once. So when he finally folded his hands one evening, after yet another HOA patrol drive-by, and told me, "Son, it's time," I sat up straight like I was back in high school, trying not to get expelled. "Time for what?" I asked. He didn't say anything. Just reached into the bottom drawer of his old filing cabinet, the one with the peeling VA sticker and the jammed track, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He slid it across the table. Inside were documents older than I was. Handwritten bylaw drafts, county zoning records, founding community charters with his signature, Governor Walter L. Emerson, smack in the middle of them. "I helped write the bones of this town," he said. "Didn't think I'd have to use it to defend my own damn porch." Turns out, back when the town was nothing more than a grocery store, 2 stop signs, and a promise, Grandpa had worked with local legislators to create a unique hybrid between a traditional municipality and a development zone. The result was a charter neighborhood that allowed certain legacy provisions, including one particularly dusty clause buried in HOA policy, Section 9, Subdivision B, Paragraph 12. Any community member in good standing may submit a formal request to audit any homeowners association expenditure exceeding 1.0 if said member provides proof of legacy property rights within the founding boundaries of jurisdiction. Translation: I could audit any big expense the HOA made, as long as I lived on land within the original town borders. Our house qualified. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd just handed a loaded rifle to the man she'd tried to bully off his own land. I started attending meetings again, not as a protester or angry homeowner, but as what I like to call a smiling problem. I wore slacks, I shook hands. I complimented people's front lawns and asked about their kids. But in my briefcase were 3 things: copies of Grandpa's charters, a legal pad thicker than the town's last 3 budgets, and a digital recorder that ran quietly every time Karen opened her mouth. My first official request was simple: a list of all expenditures over 1.0 in the last fiscal quarter. Margaret, the HOA secretary, blinked at me like I'd asked for nuclear codes. Karen tried to stonewall, said they'd need to consult outside counsel, which was HOA, speak for stall until he forgets. But I didn't forget. I sent a registered letter the next day, citing the exact bylaw number. By Friday, I had the documents in my inbox, and that's when the smell hit. You ever open an old drain that's been sitting dry too long? That sour mix of mold, rot, and secrets? That's what it felt like reading the HOA's expense reports. Elite Garden Services, billed for $300 for seasonal shrub rotation 3 times in 1 month. Community Safety Initiative funding, $500 for patrol uniforms and equipment, no itemization, no receipts. Consulting fees to a company called Sunstone Civic Logistics, $12,000 for strategic compliance analysis. I Googled Sunstone. Their website had 1 page and no contact number. The domain was registered under a shell company tied to a P.O. box in Delaware. I pulled up Karen Wilkes's old LinkedIn. Guess who used to be a senior compliance officer at Sunstone Civic Logistics? Yeah, she did. I started building a spreadsheet. Each transaction got a row, each vendor a color code. I traced addresses, cross-checked dates, built flowcharts. The deeper I went, the more crooked it looked. Contracts awarded without bids. Friends of board members listed as subcontractors. Payments split into 2 invoices to stay under the 1-0 reporting threshold. I found a 9,800 equipment upgrade tagged to a storage unit Karen personally rented under her husband's name. I drove by that unit. You know what was inside? A stack of unused yard signs and a broken power washer. That's it. Then I found the smoking gun, a 14,200 disbursement labeled Patrol Vehicle Equipment. They were retired Crown Vics with magnetic community patrol signs slapped on the sides. Nothing inside but clipboards and expired pepper spray. No lights, no radios. Certainly no equipment worth $14,000. But that money didn't go to the vehicle lot. It went to a private bank account in the name of one Calvin Wilkes, Karen's son. A 24-year-old freelance consultant with no address on file and a personal blog full of conspiracy theories and shirtless selfies. I brought it to Grandpa. He read through the printouts in silence, then nodded once. Good. Now we make them sweat. I submitted a formal complaint to the board, 3 pages neatly typed with all supporting documents in triplicate. I requested a hearing. Karen tried to deny it, citing frivolous allegations. But I copied the entire neighborhood on the email. I knocked on doors. I handed out summaries. I gave neighbors bullet points and QR codes. People started asking questions. The next meeting was packed. Some came for the drama. Others came because their own violation fines had suddenly started to make sense. Mr. Ellison from 2 streets over had paid $600 last year for a decorative curtain infraction. Mrs. Patel got fined for excessive porch noise during Diwali. The fines didn't go to maintenance. They went to a budget line labeled Board Discretionary. Karen tried to play defense, said I was cherry-picking data, said I was manipulating numbers, but she never denied the payments. She never answered why her son was on the vendor list. She never explained why our patrol cars had gear that couldn't be found. That night, she called for an executive session and had the meeting adjourned early, but the damage was done. A spark had caught. People saw her panic, and once you see someone flinch, you start wondering what else they've been hiding. That's when the retaliation started. An anonymous tip to the city claimed we were running an illegal accessory dwelling unit. The city inspector showed up, saw our shed, and left with an apology. Our mailbox got knocked over twice. A fake citation was taped to our trash can for vermin-attracting disposal habits. The patrol slowed down in front of our house like a drive-by surveillance team. But Grandpa? He just cleaned his glasses, sat a little straighter, and sipped his coffee like a judge waiting for the gavel. They've overplayed, he said. Now we let them dig. I submitted a request for all internal board communications over the last 6 months. Under our bylaws, I was entitled to them. The board tried to redact everything. I appealed. And while we waited, I started a petition for a special community session to vote on board recall. Needed 75 signatures, got 103. Meanwhile, I discovered something else. A 2-year-old HOA vote approving retroactive reimbursement for leadership training seminars, attended by Karen and 2 other board members. The seminars? Cruises. One to the Bahamas, one to Santa Barbara, one labeled Urban Compliance Academy, held at a casino resort in Reno. I built a binder, color-coded tabs, a timeline, screenshots, bank transfers. I added a page called Where the Money Goes, with a pie chart so big you could see it from the back of the room. And then I waited for the recall vote. Because at this point, Karen wasn't just unethical, she was exposed. She didn't know who Grandpa was, she didn't know who I was. But she was about to learn what happens when you steal from a man who still keeps 3 generations of military medals in a display case next to the fireplace. This wasn't just about a walking stick anymore. This was about taking back our home, one bylaw at a time. The deeper I dug into the HOA's finances, the more the numbers began to feel like bones buried under a manicured lawn, arranged to look harmless from the surface, but rotten and ritualistic underneath. Karen Wilkes's little community security unit was supposed to be a neighborhood safety initiative, a friendly patrol presence to deter vandalism and ensure compliance. But the books told a different story. The CSU, as she called it, was a Frankenstein operation, stitched together from misappropriated funds, fake violation revenue, and a couple of Craigslist hires with shaved heads and tactical vests they probably bought secondhand. It wasn't licensed, it wasn't insured, and it sure as hell wasn't legal, but it was very real. And Karen was paying them more than the neighborhood spent on landscaping, road repair, and park maintenance combined. I found invoices labeled security equipment, training, but there were no records of any registered trainers, no firearm permits, and no oversight beyond Karen's signature, often duplicated, often dated suspiciously close to holidays, and often used to authorize reimbursement to herself. One line item just said tactical reconditioning for $3,200. Another said non-lethal dispersal readiness. I have no idea what that means, but I'm pretty sure a guy named Rusty with a taser and a clipboard isn't who you want deciding when to disperse your neighbors. But here's the part that made my stomach turn. The fines, funding it all, weren't random. They were strategic, calculated, aimed directly at the easiest targets, the residents least likely to fight back. I went door to door quietly. I told people I was reviewing records for an audit verification. Most folks didn't want to talk at first. But when I mentioned my grandfather's name, they let me in. And that's when the story started spilling out. Mr. Pak, an 83-year-old Korean War vet, was fined $500 for having unsecured property hazards. You know what the hazard was? A wind chime that fell off its hook during a storm. Mrs. Alvarez, a widow who uses a walker, got hit with a $200 penalty because her trash can wasn't placed with the handle facing the street. The HOA's violation guidebook didn't mention handle direction. And then there was the Martinez family. Fined $75 a week for 3 months straight over excessive driveway use. What they were actually doing was parking a second-hand medical transport van to take their grandmother to dialysis. None of them contested the charges. None of them knew how. Some didn't speak English well. Others didn't want to make trouble. Karen knew that. She was counting on it. I started compiling a file. Names, fines, addresses, repeat violations. Patterns emerged fast. People on fixed incomes were hit hardest. Renters were pressured with threats of landlord reports. The security patrol had a habit of showing up late at night, walking past windows with flashlights, shining them into yards, sometimes knocking on doors just to verify occupancy compliance. One resident, Mr. Jefferson, a retired teacher, had cameras. He showed me footage of the patrol rummaging through his recycling bins. Another neighbor found chalk markings on her sidewalk, little coded tags the patrol used to track which houses were non-cooperative. It wasn't enforcement. It was psychological warfare with a name badge and a clipboard. Meanwhile, Karen got bolder. She sent us a letter, hand-delivered by 2 CSU goons with sunglasses and matching vests, accusing Grandpa of housing prohibited weaponry. I laughed when I read it. The weaponry in question? An antique saber in a glass case from his days in the National Guard, and of course, the infamous walking stick. But the letter was worded carefully, dripping with innuendo, elevated risk, non-compliance with updated safety standards, potential violation of community stability protocols. She wasn't trying to win a legal case, she was building a narrative. One where Grandpa was a dangerous old man, hoarding contraband and threatening the peace of the neighborhood. She even submitted a motion to the HOA board to classify him as a hostile resident. I'd never even heard of that term before, but apparently, in their custom bylaws, it gave the board the right to recommend eviction for sustained disruption of community cohesion. It was absurd, it was illegal, but to someone who didn't know better, it sounded legitimate. And she was using it to scare people. So I called in backup, quietly, strategically. Grandpa made one phone call to an old friend, retired Judge Helen Marshall, and she looped in a former colleague who now worked in the Attorney General's office. I didn't give them our whole file, not yet, just a taste, enough to flag it, enough to get an ethics council to review the HOA's status. We kept things under wraps. I didn't want Karen knowing the cavalry was assembling. Instead, I kept going to meetings, smiling and nodding while she lectured the community about escalating non-compliance risks. She was trying to turn Grandpa into a pariah, and the more she pushed, the more erratic she got. When I asked for a copy of the patrol's insurance documentation, she claimed it was internal use only. When I requested training logs for CSU personnel, she said they were classified. She was running the HOA like a private security firm, but without the licenses, the oversight, or the accountability. And now, she was targeting my grandfather, one of the most decorated, respected public servants the state had ever seen. Karen made her next move on a Tuesday. I was walking the dog when I saw a patrol vehicle, one of the old Crown Vics they'd repurposed, parked illegally in front of our driveway. 2 CSU agents were in the front seat. I recognized one of them, guy named Donnie, used to sell roofing out of a van, now apparently deputized by Karen's clipboard. They were watching our house. I walked right up and tapped on the glass. Donnie flinched. "Neighborhood survey," he muttered. "Routine perimeter checks." I leaned in close. "How much she paying you to harass a blind man?" He didn't answer, just rolled up the window and started the engine. They pulled away slow, but not before I got a picture of the license plate and the barcode on the back of their badge. I ran it through a few databases. Nothing, no registration, no affiliation with any recognized security organization, just a decal and a fake badge number printed on a laminate. At this point, the file was thick enough to knock someone out. Financial records, violation maps, photos, statements, surveillance. But I needed one more thing, proof that Karen knew what she was doing was illegal, not just overzealous, not just petty, criminal. That came in the form of an email. One of Karen's former board allies, let's call him Rick, had grown uncomfortable with how far things were going. He reached out through a burner Gmail, said he had something I needed to see. We met at the dog park. He handed me a thumb drive with a single file, an exported inbox archive from Karen's HOA email. One message in particular stood out. It was sent to another board member after a resident complained about being fined for an invisible violation. Karen wrote, "Don't worry, they'll pay it. They always do. People like that don't ask questions. Just issue the notice and let the patrol handle the rest." That was it. That was the line. People like that. We knew exactly what she meant. So I printed it, blew it up on a poster board, added it to the presentation. I'd been planning something big for the upcoming recall meeting, but now, I wasn't just going to remove Karen. I was going to expose her. Every dollar, every false claim, every fabricated citation. She thought she could scare us into silence. But she forgot one thing. My grandfather may have stepped off the political stage, but his name still carried weight. And I didn't just inherit his porch or his last name. I inherited his instincts. And right now, every instinct I had told me that Karen Wilkes was about to learn what happens when you build a militia out of lies and aim it at the wrong house. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, but because I was ready. Every file, every photograph, every redacted invoice and recorded conversation, categorized, cross-referenced, backed up in triplicate. The binder was a brick. a black 3-ring coffin packed tight with the remains of Karen Wilkes' little empire. I called it Operation Stick It to the HOA. And it wasn't just about revenge, it was about making sure no one like her ever held power over people like my grandfather again. I submitted the recall petition 2 weeks prior. Required 75 homeowner signatures. I had 164. That meant, by charter, the HOA was required to hold a full community hearing with open floor time, a budget review segment, and a final vote. Karen tried to delay it. Claimed the meeting space was double booked. Claimed her printer was broken. Claimed her dog swallowed the quorum. But I'd already copied the county in. If she didn't hold the hearing, the state would. She blinked, and that's when I knew we had her. The room was packed wall to wall. Standing room only. Every folding chair in the community center had been filled before the start time, and latecomers were leaning on walls, sitting on window ledges, even standing outside the open doors just to listen. Karen strutted in like she still ran the place, clipboard tucked under one arm, fake smile stapled to her face. But her eyes betrayed the panic beneath, fast flicks around the room, checking for allies, for lifelines. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know how big the wave would be. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Alvarez whispering in Spanish to her son. In the back, I spotted Mr. Jefferson with his cane and camera rig. And in the front row, center seat, legs crossed, silver eagle-headed cane across his lap, sat Grandpa, wearing his old navy blazer like a crown. Karen tried to open the meeting with a bland report about quarterly compliance satisfaction metrics. I let her ramble for a solid 3 minutes before I stood up, motioned to the stack of binders beside me, and said, "Point of order. I have a formal report under Section 9B12 of the Charter Bylaws. Community Member Audit Clause. Legacy exemption applied." She tried to wave it off. "You'll have to submit that through the compliance office," she said, voice taut as fishing wire. I smiled. Already did. 2 weeks ago. Certified receipt logged by Margaret, page 8 of the agenda. Her face twitched. People turned to look at her. She looked at Margaret. Margaret shrugged. She'd flipped. A week earlier, she started sending me old meeting minutes through her burner email. Apparently, Karen once fined her $300 for over-glittered holiday decor. There are no small rebellions. Karen cleared her throat. "Fine, proceed." I stepped up to the podium, connected my laptop to the projector, and opened the slideshow titled HOA Financial Transparency and Legal Compliance Review, Fiscal Year Exposure. First slide. A photo of one of the patrol cars parked illegally across my grandfather's driveway. The caption read, "What they built with your money." Then came the graphs, expenses versus revenue. Fines issued by household income bracket, security budget growth over time, and then the breakdown of where it went. Sunstone Civic Logistics, Karen's old company. Elite Garden Services, Karen's brother-in-law. CSU Equipment Requisition, Karen's son. The crowd was quiet at first. Then came the gasps. Then the murmurs. Then the whispers turned to outrage. Slide 7 was a scanned email. Karen's email. They always pay. People like that don't ask questions. I let it hang in silence for 5 full seconds. Then I hit play on the video file. Drone footage from 2 weeks prior. The HOA patrol tailing Mr. Pack to his mailbox, hovering outside Mrs. Alvarez's window with flashlights. 2 goons knocking on doors, demanding ID from a new renter with a thick accent. And then, the pièce de résistance, footage of 2 patrol members trying to yank Grandpa's walking stick from his hands while he sat, blind and furious, on his own porch. Gasps turned to audible disgust. One woman actually shouted, "You pigs!" Karen reached for the mic. "That's enough," she snapped. "This presentation is unauthorized. Shut it down." I kept going. "Unauthorized?" I said. "Page 12 of the charter allows for audit presentation under confirmed petition protocol." I held up the binder. "Signed and time-stamped. We're not done." I clicked to the next slide. An itemized invoice showing $14,200 spent on vehicle modifications, supposedly for the patrol cars. Cross-referenced with DMV data, proving they hadn't been modified in years. The funds were transferred to a shell company, registered in Delaware. Address matched Karen's home office. She stood up. "This is slander," she hissed. "These are lies." Someone from the crowd shouted, "Then prove it!" Another said, "You stole from us." The noise started building. Anger, betrayal, people realizing the fines they paid funded Karen's fake fiefdom. She tried to adjourn the meeting. "Motion to close," she yelled. "Motion to adjourn," seconded. "We're done here." And then the doors opened. 3 uniformed officers stepped into the room, real ones. Badges, radios, calm authority. Behind them, 2 men in suits. One was with the Attorney General's office. The other carried a sealed evidence box. "Karen Wilkes," the lead officer said, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges including embezzlement, misuse of public funds, impersonation of law enforcement personnel, and violation of federal HOA protections." Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't arrest me," she said, backing up. "This is my meeting. This is my community. This is—" She didn't finish the sentence. The officer read her Miranda rights as he cuffed her. Gasps turned to cheers. Margaret covered her mouth. Mr. Jefferson stood up and started clapping. Soon, the whole room followed. The suits went straight to the HOA office next door. They seized the server, collected the files, hauled out boxes of shredded paper and flash drives. The other board members resigned on the spot. By the time the sun set, Karen was in county lockup, the patrol vehicles were impounded, and the community's fake security militia had vanished into thin air. And Grandpa? He stood up slowly, took his walking stick in hand, and walked, unaided, unbothered, and unbowed, right up to the podium. He said nothing. Just lifted the cane, silver eagle head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The place went silent. He didn't need to say a word. 2 weeks later, the community held a mural painting event. Kids, neighbors, volunteers. We painted the side of the community center, a massive rendering of that walking stick, flanked by stars and oak leaves. Underneath it, in bold black letters, we added the words, "Respect is not optional." Karen's name was removed from every HOA record. A new board was elected, this time with term limits and transparency clauses. All fake fines were refunded. Patrol vehicles sold off, funds donated to a local veteran shelter. Grandpa's back on his porch every morning. Same chair, same cane, same quiet strength. And every time someone passes by, they tip their hat, smile, or just pause to nod, like they're saluting not just a man but a message. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never assume that dignity is submission. And never, ever touch another man's walking stick unless you're ready to answer for it in front of God, the law, and a room full of neighbors holding paintbrushes and receipts.